Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ksenia and I make videos for people who are going through the family immigration process. I'm not an immigration attorney. My videos are based on publicly available information, my own experience, and the experience of my subscribers. And the purpose of my channel is to give you guys the confidence to go through this process completely on your own. In today's video, we are going to fill out the application for naturalization N-400 online. USCIS encourages online filing when possible. Starting April 1st, when USCIS begins to implement new application fees, you will even receive a $50 discount if you file your applications online. What I like about the online applications, it checks your eligibility. It helps you fill out your address and employment history with accuracy and no gaps. And it also helps you calculate your travel history. The online application will do calculations for you, which will make it easier for you to see whether or not you still qualify to apply for naturalization. Let's get started on the applications. In order to get started on your N-400 application, you will first have to go to uscis.gov and sign in to your online USCIS account, or you can also create an account if you don't yet have one. Once you log into your USCIS account, if you don't already have any forms, then your home screen will look something like this. However, it may also look different if you already have cases that you have been tracking previously. You will have to either click this button that says file a form online, or you can go in the My Account drop-down menu and click on this button that says file a form online. Next, you will be asked to select which form you will be filing. Click Start Form. And what I really like about the N-400 online process is that before you can even start filing your application, they will give you an opportunity to see if you are even eligible to apply for naturalization. It will ask you a series of questions in order to determine your eligibility. In our sample case, we're going to say that none of our parents were a US citizen. If you answer yes to this question, there is a potential that you may already be a US citizen through one of your parents, which is not the purpose of the N-400 application. But in our case, the answer is no. Click Next. Provide your age. You're likely to be 18 or older. Are you a member of the U.S. Armed Forces? Members of U.S. Armed Forces have certain perks and privileges when it comes to applying for naturalization, such as, for example, only being able to apply for naturalization after serving in the Armed Forces for 1 year, and also not having to pay the naturalization fee. But let's say that this is not our case. Click Next. Are you a lawful permanent resident? This is absolutely a requirement, so your answer should be yes. When did you become a lawful permanent resident? So let's say that in our case, we are applying for naturalization based on the 3-year lawful permanent residency rule for spouses of a US citizen. So let's say, for example, we've become a lawful permanent resident less than 5 years ago. So then it will ask you if you are married to a US citizen. Let's say that in our case it's yes. Have you been married for 3 years or longer? Let's say yes. Has your spouse been a US citizen for 3 years or longer? We'll say yes, because it is also a requirement based on the 3-year naturalization rule. Have you left the United States in the past 3 years? You can say yes or no. This question obviously has to do with maintaining continuous presence. Have any of your trips outside the United States been longer than 6 months? We'll say no, because if they have, they may have interrupted our eligibility. Have you moved in the past 3 months? We'll say no. If you moved even within the state or to a different state, then you have to make sure that prior to applying for naturalization, you would have lived in the area that has jurisdiction over your naturalization case for at least 3 months before you're able to apply. click next. And now it will tell us whether or not we may be eligible for naturalization. Now we can actually get started with the application. Here, before you start, they will let you know the fee that you will have to pay. They will let you know some things that you need to know about online filing. Next, some additional notes about this form. You can come back and work on this application over time. You don't have to complete this application in one sitting. It will only be deleted if you don't work on it for 30 days or longer. However, if you continuously come back to your application and make small changes or add information to your application, then it will reset the 30-day timer every time. So now we can start the application. The first part of the application has to do with your eligibility. So based on the answers that you have provided before, this has determined your eligibility. If you believe that this is not true, you can obviously change, but let's say that everything stayed the same. Click next. Is someone assisting you? So if there is an attorney or an official preparer helping you with your form, or if, for example, you don't speak English and your spouse or a family member is actually preparing this information for you, then you can also say yes. They will ask whether or not you're using a preparer or an interpreter also. If you answer yes to these questions, then towards the end, you will be asked to provide the information about the preparer and the interpreter. But let's say that in our case, nobody is helping us, so we'll click no and next. Provide your current legal name. If you have never changed your name, then this is easy, but if you change your name through marriage, then obviously you will put your actual married name here. And middle name may include a patronym if you have it from your home country, but it does not have to. Next, it asks if you have used any other names since birth. If you say yes, you will be asked to provide those other names, such as maiden names, any other nicknames or aliases you have used on official documents. This does not mean nicknames that you use with family or friends, or names you use on social media, for example. This means any names that you have used on official documents. And it will also ask you to upload the evidence of that different name or name change in a form of an official document. Let's say that in our case it's no. And the next question asks if you would like to legally change your name through the naturalization process. The naturalization process allows you to change your name basically for free. I mean, you will still have to pay the naturalization fee, but you will not have to pay any additional fees to change your name. Let's say, for example, that you wanted to look something like this. If you choose to change your name, there may be additional background checks that will have to be completed, which may potentially delay your naturalization process. Changing your name on the N-400 application will also change the place where you will receive your naturalization oath ceremony. It will be in front of a judge in a courthouse as opposed to a USCIS location. You will be asked one more time during your naturalization interview if this is the name that you would like to use. So it is likely that after the interview, you may not have the same day oath ceremony. And if you do not change your name on the N-400 application but decide to do it at a later time, you will have to bring or submit the form N-565, which has an additional fee. Next, provide your phone number. If this phone number is the same number that you would like to be reached during daytime, you can click this box. If this is the same phone number that you would like to be reached in the evenings, you can click this box. If this is the same number you would like to be reached by at work as well, you can click this. For your email address, it should automatically be filled in with the email that you used to log into this account, but if you would like to change it, you absolutely can. Next, provide your mailing address. You can completely skip this top part if you actually reside and receive mail at the mailing address which you will provide here. In care of name means that somebody else will be able to receive mail on your behalf. If you live at your mailing address, or if you're able to receive mail at your mailing address, you do not have to write anything here. And because this is a sample address, we're going to receive the following error. But again, just double check that everything is typed in correctly to make sure that you will receive important mail at this address, and provide your county where you reside. The county is important because for the purposes of naturalization, it helps determine which jurisdiction area will take care of your naturalization case. It's also going to be important at a later point when you provide your address history. There are also some special instructions here for people who are receiving mail at a PO box, or if you have a special circumstance. But if none of this applies to you, you can skip past this and click next. Next, you will be asked to provide your date of birth and country of birth. Next. Provide your country of citizenship or nationality. So even if you are a permanent resident, you're not yet a citizen of the United States. So you will have to provide your actual citizenship that you hold right now. If you hold multiple citizenships from different countries, you will need to provide the name of the foreign country that last issued your passport. If you are a citizen of the country that no longer exists, then you will have to use the current name of that country. If you are a stateless individual, then you will still have to provide the name of the current country where you were last a citizen or national. Next, it asks you to indicate when you became a lawful permanent resident, and you will be able to see that date as the issue date on your permanent resident card, which is also known as your green card. If you are filling out this application earlier than the 90-day period that is allowed for you to apply for naturalization, so let's say, for example, that we became a lawful permanent resident in June 2021, then it will give you an error that says you are not yet eligible to apply for naturalization, and it will specify that you can only begin applying for naturalization if you're applying, for example, based on the 3-year rule. You can begin applying at 2 years and 9 months mark, which means 3 months before your third green card anniversary. And it will give you exactly the date when you will be able to start applying for naturalization. This doesn't mean that you can't fill out this application ahead of time. It's just closer to that date. Obviously, you will have to go through all the information on this form again, and this message should go away. Moving forward, you will need to provide the name that exactly appears on your permanent resident card, and if the name on your permanent resident card matches your current legal name, then you will simply have to click this. Provide your A number. Your A number is your USCIS number on your green card. Okay. Click next. Provide your social security number. It is very likely that you have a social security number. Most applicants apply for a social security number during the time that they obtain their green card. Next, provide your online USCIS account number. So by this stage, you probably already have an online account number. If you, for example, applied for the I-751 removal of conditions, then on those notices from USCIS, it is likely that you already have an account number, or you can also place your account number directly in your USCIS account by going to Profile, where it will show any currently active cases you have, and there you will be able to find your online account number. So let's say, for example, this is our account number. Click next. Provide general biographic information. Once you finished completing your biographic information, click next. Provide your current residence address. So if you live at the same address that you provided earlier in the application as your mailing address, then you will simply have to check this box. If you receive mail and you live at different addresses, then obviously you will have to uncheck this box and provide the address where you actually reside. But let's say in our case, our mailing address is the same as our current residence address. Next, you will be asked to provide when you moved here. If you really don't remember the date, just estimate it as closely as possible. Click Next. And now you will need to provide the address history of where you have lived for the past 5 years. As you can tell, they have already filled in the residence history for your most recent address, but we need to complete the 5-year history. So here you can click the Add Another Address box and enter the address where you have lived, and provide the dates when you have lived here. Save entry. And now we have completed 5-year address history. Click Next. Now you will need to provide your employment/school information for the past 5 years. So let's say we'll add the first entry. You will need to indicate the employment type. We are currently employed. Provide the name of the employer. Provide your occupation. If you do not feel like any of these options fit, then you will have to click this option, occupation not reported or unknown or invalid. And if you currently work here, you will click this button, but you will also have to provide the date when you initially started working here and provide the address of your employer. And save entry once you completed that. If you have multiple concurrent employers, you can also indicate them here. It should be no problem. But let's say, for example, that prior to 2021, we also attended school for a period of time. And make sure that you don't have any gaps. And if you have gaps, then in that case, you will need to also provide information for there. So for example, we have a gap between May 30th, 2021 and December 1st, 2021. And let's say, for example, that Jane was unemployed during that time. So you could say add a period of unemployment and provide the dates. And save entry. As you can see, it will arrange it for you from most recent, and it will backdate it for you 5 years and arrange it in order. So once your employment history is complete, click Next. If there are any gaps, then you will have to provide information on those gaps, or maybe if, for example, you made a mistake in some dates, but if there are no gaps, then you should get no errors and you can proceed further. Next, you will be asked about military service, but let's say we have never served and we're not currently a member. Click Next. This question asks if you were a male who lived in the United States between ages of 18 to 26, but please keep in mind that this does not include anyone who was a lawful non-immigrant status. So that means if you were an international student, if you were on a tourist visa here at some point, then in that case, your answer will be no. But if you are a man between ages of 18 to 26 and you lived in the United States as a lawful permanent resident or a refugee, or even if you were undocumented, you will have to select yes. In our case, we are a female, so we can say no. But this question is important because consecutively, it will ask you about selective service. So if you answer yes, it will then ask you if you registered for selective service, which is what all men between ages of 18 to 26 are supposed to do. If you didn't register, you will be asked to register with the selective service before you submit your naturalization application if you are still under age 26. However, if you failed to register, then you will need to go to the selective service website and see what your options are in this situation. You may have to provide a status letter to show that you did not register for selective service, for example, and all of this can be found on this page. Let's say in our case, back to the application, we are not a male who needs to register for selective service. Click no and next. It asks you if you have taken any trips outside the United States for the past 5 years, and you will need to include all trips that lasted longer than 24 hours. If you say yes, you will then have to provide your travel history in the past 5 years. So let's say, for example, you were out for a month here, so you can save entry, and it will also calculate for you how many days you have been out of the United States for the past 5 years. But I really like the online application because let's say, for example, you did take a trip since becoming a permanent resident. You had a trip that took longer than 6 months. In that case, if you violate the continuous residence requirement for the purposes of naturalization, you will receive the following error. And this potentially could be a problem for you, which is why I really like the online application because it does all the calculations for you. But let's say, for example, we didn't actually take those long trips. If there is no issues with your continuous presence, then they will not give you that error message. So once you complete your travel history, you can click next. The final couple of questions in this section ask if you have any physical or developmental impairments. You may be able to qualify for an English language civics exemption based on that, but I recommend that you read the form instructions to see if you would be able to apply for a disability exception. But let's say in our situation, the answer is no. Click next. It will ask you if you are requesting any accommodations. If you have a disability or impairment, then obviously read the accommodations that they may be able to provide for you and click yes or no. Click next. Now you will be asked information about your family. So provide your marital status. If you're applying based on marriage to a US citizen, you will obviously answer married like we do in our case. Click next. Provide your spouse's current legal name and the date when you married your spouse. Click next. Provide your spouse's date of birth. If your spouse has ever used any other legal names before, any other names since birth, let's say no, for example, and their current address. If you live with your spouse, then you can simply click this box and it will fill it in for you. Or if your spouse doesn't reside with you, then provide their address here. But again, if you're applying based on the 3-year marriage to a US citizen rule, then one of the requirements is that you're actually residing with your US citizen spouse. So it is likely that you will have to check yes to this box. Click next. Is your spouse a US citizen? You would say yes or no. If you answer no, that your spouse is not a US citizen, you may not be able to apply based on the 3-year citizenship rule and when they became a citizen. So they either become a citizen at birth, or we can click other. Maybe they obtained citizenship through naturalization, then you would have to provide their naturalization date. Or if they, for example, obtained citizenship through parents, then here you would have to indicate their N-600 confirmation date or something like that. But let's say that our spouse became a citizen at birth, which is a case for a lot of people. Click next. Is your spouse a member of the US Armed Forces? Let's say no, for example. If we answer yes, there may be additional questions that come up later in the application. And provide your spouse's current employment. Click next. It asks you if you have ever been married previously. If you have, then you will be asked to provide your prior marital information. You will need to provide your ex-spouse's legal name and when you were married to the spouse. But let's say in our case, we have never been married previously, so we can answer no. Click next. You will be also asked if your current spouse has been married previously, yes or no. Same here. If you answer yes, you will need to provide their prior spouse's name and marriage dates. But we can also click no and click next if your spouse has never been married before you. Provide information about all children that you, the person applying for naturalization, has. So it means that any children that you may have with your current US citizen spouse, as well as children that you maybe had prior of any age, whether or not they are alive, missing, or deceased. You will need to indicate all children that live with you or don't live with you, any current stepchildren that you have, any adopted children. When it comes to stepchildren, you will obviously only have to provide information on the stepchildren if you are currently married to their parent. Once you are no longer married to the parent of those children, they technically no longer count as your stepchildren. So keep that in mind. And on the next page, you will be asked to provide the information of these children. And you would have to provide the exact description of this child. Are they your biological child, stepchild, legally adopted, and their date of birth. Click next. You will need to provide your child's country of birth and their current address. You can either indicate that the child is missing or deceased, or the child lives with you. That way, the child's information will be filled in automatically here. Click next. If your child is a US born citizen, then they do not have an A number, so you can click they don't have an A number. Then you will need to add any other children that you may have. But once you have completed the children's information, click next. Now you will be asked about your parents' information, whether or not they were married before your 18th birthday, yes or no. Are your parents US citizens? So if you answer that at least one of your parents is a US citizen, you may already be a US citizen and you will get this message from USCIS, but likely if you're applying for naturalization, then you were not able to obtain citizenship through parents. So the answer is most likely going to be no. Click next. So the next section is the section about moral character, which is a series of yes or no questions. If a question or any part of a question applies to you now or has ever applied to you in the past, you must answer yes. They do tell you that your answers, whether yes or no, will not automatically cause your application to be denied. One thing I would say is when filling out this portion of the application, of course, depending on the question, but more likely than not, if you have to answer yes to any of these questions, I think it is best for you to hire an attorney who can guide you through this process. Let's move forward. Have you ever claimed to be a US citizen in writing or any other way? I would hope that you answer no. Click next. Hopefully you have never registered or never voted in any elections. Click next. Have you ever held any hereditary title or order of nobility in another country? Next, do you owe any federal, state, or local taxes? You would have to answer yes or no. And this only refers if you owe any federal, state, or local taxes at the time of filing your naturalization application. If you have owed taxes in the past and you paid them off, you do not have to answer yes to this question because you already paid them off. If you still owe, but you are on a payment plan, you will have to answer yes. You will need to provide an explanation. You can provide an explanation like the one I'm showing here, and you will have to provide evidence of that in the evidence portion towards the end of this application. If you file your taxes jointly with your spouse, by the virtue of you filing your taxes jointly with your spouse, the debt that is listed on those tax returns is also technically your debt. So in that case, you will still need to provide proof of you being on the payment plan with the IRS, or you would just have to pay off those taxes before you file for naturalization. Next, have you ever not filed the federal, state, or local tax returns since you became a lawful permanent resident? You are required to file taxes as a permanent resident. You should be answering no to this question. Have you ever not filed? But if you failed to file taxes, or maybe you didn't have to file taxes because you were actually unemployed or you didn't make enough income to have to pay federal income taxes, then you will need to provide an explanation here. Have you called yourself a non-US resident on taxes when you were filing them since becoming a permanent resident? This means not have you ever called yourself a non-US resident for tax purposes, but since becoming a permanent resident, have you called yourself a non-resident? You will also hopefully answer no to this question. Click next. Have you ever been declared legally incompetent or confined to a mental institution? Click next. Have you ever been a member of any organization, association, fund, foundation, party, club, society? A lot of people may have to answer yes to this question, and then you will simply have to provide the name about your organization, the purpose of your organization. So you can read the description of a sample club that I have included on the screen. And if you are currently a member of this club, you will click this button and provide the date of your membership. If you have more than one group, club, association, organization, you can add them all here. So let's say, for example, you are also part of a professional union for your job. Then you will have to include that information here as well. You can also include whether or not you are required to be part of this professional organization based on your employment. And obviously, don't forget to provide the dates when you were or are a member of this organization. We only provided 2 examples of present groups, but if you have any groups that you have been affiliated with in the past, you will also need to provide them here. Once you are finished completing this portion, you can click next. The next questions ask you about being a member of the Communist Party. In this situation, my only word of advice for you is to contact an immigration attorney who can help you navigate this, because it may potentially be an issue for you down the line. So don't do this application alone. So hopefully you will answer no to the following questions. I'm not going to read all of these. You can slow the screen down at your pace. You can pause and read these questions on your own. If you had any weapons training, ever served in the military in other countries, then you would have to answer yes to some of the questions that come up about that. When it comes to crimes and offenses section, they do give you a notice that you will need to provide answers and answer yes to any of the questions that apply to you. Even if your records have been sealed, expunged, or cleared, you must disclose this information, even if anybody promised to you that this information is no longer a part of your record or you don't have to disclose it. When it comes to immigration, you absolutely have to disclose it. So if you have to answer yes to any of these questions, you will need to provide an explanation and provide evidence for that as well. When it comes to traffic violations, although you will have to answer yes to the questions that ask about traffic violations, such as, for example, the question that asks about being arrested, cited, or detained by law enforcement. So traffic violations, traffic tickets are considered citations, so you will still have to answer yes to that question and provide an explanation. But according to the form instructions, you don't actually need to submit the documentation of traffic fines or incidents that did not involve an arrest or did not involve drugs or alcohol, and if the only penalty was a fine of less than $500 or points on your driving record. And also, you will have an opportunity to clarify that during your naturalization interview. Any immigration proceedings that have been happening, you will need to answer yes or no. If you have ever been in removal proceedings, but based on the decision of the judge, you were then not removed and it was decided that you can remain in the United States and apply for certain immigration benefits, then you do not have to answer yes to this question. This only has to do with if you have ever actually been removed or deported from the United States. If you have ever been in removal proceedings based on asylum, for example, or something like that, even after you claimed a refugee status, you would have to answer yes. Next questions have to do with the military service. Hopefully you'll answer no. Now here you will have to answer hopefully yes to the following questions, because these questions ask if you pledge your allegiance to the United States. So if you support the US Constitution, of course, you will have to answer yes. Do you understand the oath of allegiance to the United States? You will most likely have to answer yes. Are you willing to take the oath of allegiance? Then you will most likely have to answer yes. If the law requires, will you bear arms, which means will you fight on behalf of the United States? Will you be part of the U.S. Armed Forces, even if non-combatant? So basically, they're asking you if you are going to be a law-abiding citizen and follow the law no matter what when you become the U.S. citizen. So most likely, you will have to answer yes to these questions. And finally, we are at the evidence portion of this application. You will need to provide the following evidence. the permanent residence card, which means you will need to provide a copy of the front and the back of your green card. You can upload the front and the back on the same page or on different pages, as long as they are clear and readable. Next, you will need to provide a copy of your marriage certificate because you are applying based on the marriage to the United States citizen. Moving forward, now here you will need to provide additional evidence to support your application, such as providing your tax documents for the past 3 years. And they do say that the tax returns are not required for every application, but they encourage you to provide them, especially if you're applying on the basis of marriage to a US citizen or traveled outside the United States for 6 months or more. So provide the copies of your forms 1040, for example, or your IRS transcripts from the past 3 years. As we mentioned earlier, if you have evidence of having a payment plan with the IRS, for example, that you owe taxes, for instance, then you can also upload it here. If you're applying based on the 3-year marriage rule, then in this case, you will need to provide evidence of your current spouse's U.S. citizenship. So either their birth certificate, certificate of naturalization, certificate of citizenship, or the biographic page of their unexpired U.S. passport. And then you will have to upload evidence of your marriage. If you have applied for a green card based on marriage, then you will be very familiar with the kind of evidence that you should be providing in this section. They're mostly looking for legally binding and financially binding documentation from your marriage, especially in the past 3 years. So here, upload as much evidence as possible. A lot of you may be also applying for naturalization while your removal of conditions application is still in the process, but it doesn't mean that the person reviewing your naturalization application will have immediate access to your removal of conditions file. So here, you may want to provide any evidence, even if you have provided it before. If you have any children, you will need to upload their birth certificates and any additional evidence that you wish to provide. Once you upload all the evidence, you shouldn't receive any of these errors if you upload everything where it needs to go. It will take you to a page that will give you a chance to review your application. So click on the review application. It will give you the filing fee that you will have to pay for this application. You will see the summary of your application here. You can view your case snapshot via a PDF file, which then you can save for your own records, because after submitting the application, you may not be able to access the application again unless you submit a Freedom of Information Act request. That is why it is always important to have a copy for your own records. So once you review your application, you can click next. You will be asked to provide a statement. Click next. And this portion is where you will be including your signature. So once you read your statement and agreement, you will type in your full name here. This is technically going to be your signature. And after clicking next, you will have a chance to actually submit your application, and you will be taken to a separate page where you will have to provide your credit or debit card or bank account information to pay for the naturalization application. So this is basically it. I hope that you found this video useful. I hope I was able to answer most of your questions. Let me know if you have any additional questions. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Give this video a thumbs up, and I hope to see you guys in my next videos.